In this video, I'm going to show you how I make all these things with one piece of 12 by 12 scrapbook paper. And first up is we have a little notebook and a tag with some twine at the top, a journal card with a 3D heart that kind of pops off the page, and some ribbon, and a couple of little small embellishments that I made with the scraps, a bookmark, standard 2x6 bookmark with some twine, and then a couple more embellishments that I made. And this here is made out of an index card, so you'll need one standard size index card also. And another little tag with a heart punch and a hidden paper clip. And a little flag that you can put in your journal. Alright, so this is the piece of 12 by 12 scrapbook paper that I have chose to use. We're going to start with the envelope for the library pocket. And this piece of paper is going to be cut to 5 3/4 by 4 1/2. And then we're going to score it on both of the long ends at 1/2 inch. And then I just flip the paper over and score the other side at the 1/2 inch mark. And then we're going to need to score the pocket and then the flap. And the pocket we're going to do at 5 3/8. And then the flap for the top is going to be 1 3/4. Alright, so now that we have our score lines, I like to fold the pieces up for the pocket and then the flap to make sure that everything fits right. And now we're going to cut the pieces at the top on the score line to that middle crease and then cut off at an angle. That's for the flap. And then we're going to do the same thing for the bottom. We're going to start at the bottom, cut up the crease line to the middle, and then cut out at an angle. So the only thing that you should have left are those two flaps in the middle on both sides. And then keep your scraps because we're going to use those. So your envelope should look like this. So you fold those in on the side. And then your envelope folds up and then the flap folds down. And then we're just going to open everything back up. And I like to round the corners at the top of the flap. So I'm going to use the 10mm corner rounder. And I'm going to use a couple of stamps to decorate the blank spot on my envelope when you open the flap. So I have chosen a couple of stamps. And I'm going to use the black soot and Distress Oxide. And I need a scrap piece of paper, that way I can make sure that my stamp is inked up good. And then I do use these, the scrap paper that I stamp the ink on. I do cut those out and use those in other parts of my journals. So I'm going to stamp that kind of at the top there at the flap. And you'll notice I did not re-ink my stamp because I want it to be kind of paler, lighter in the background. And then I chose this stamp to use to go over top of it. And then I'm going to ink up about half of the stamp from the middle all the way to the top because I'm only going to use about half the stamp. And then I stamp it on my scrap paper and then directly onto my pocket or my envelope. And I'm going to use the same ink without re-inking it and then just keep going down a little further. And then I fold the pocket up there on the envelope to make sure it's going to cover. I'm fine with the stamp being faint. That's kind of how I wanted it to look. And I like using Fabri-Tac for the paper to glue it together because it doesn't make the paper wrinkle or bubble. You get a nice smooth finish. And then you want to make sure that you only put glue where the pocket part is. So I'm going to add the glue to the pocket and then attach it to those side flaps. I'm going to fold those in. And then once the glue dries, we have our envelope ready. And then next up, we have the little library card pocket. And then we're going to take the smaller square piece and make the library card pocket. You also need a regular size index card. And we're going to cut it at 5 3/4 by 4. And then once you got that cut, I'm going to flip my thing over so I can score this. And we're going to score it at 3/8 and then 3 5/8. They're on the long ends. And we have the pocket we're going to score at 3 1/2. And then the same thing like the envelope, I like to fold on the crease lines just to make sure everything lines up good. And we're going to cut starting on the long end down to the middle and then off to an angle. And then make sure and save your scraps because we're going to use those. And then you just fold on the crease line for your pocket and flip it over for the back there and fold those little flaps in. Corner rounder, I use 10 millimeter. And then just like the envelope, I'm going to stamp the inside before I put it all together. And then I just fold the pocket up and then the flaps back just to make sure that I got the stamp up far enough. And then I'll take my Fabri-Tac and glue the flap there onto the back of it. That way it holds the pocket in place. And then once we got the pocket done, we're going to start on the little note card that goes inside of it. So you just need a standard size index card. And I'm going to cut it to 3 inches in width. And then keep the cutoff piece to, we're going to attach a tab to the top of that. And I like to check the card to make sure it's going to fit down inside of the envelope. And I'm going to round the corners with my 10 millimeter corner rounder. And I'll just do that just at the top. And I like it to look a little old and worn, so I'm going to use the foam brush and some black soot in the Distress Oxide. And I'm just going to kind of go around all the edges there and ink it up just to make it look a little older. And I'm going to do the same thing for the note card. And then I like to bend over a corner there and run my foam brush on the crease just to make it look a little older. I'm going to use the same stamp as I did for the pocket and the envelope. And I'm going to stamp that onto the note card. And then I'm going to use a stamp for the top. There is always hope. This is my favorite stamp. All right, so next we're going to make the little notebook, the mini notebook. So I cut a small rectangular piece into 3 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to fold it in half to make the front and back cover for the notebook. And then I'm going to use regular notebook paper for the inside of the mini notebook. So I'm going to cut the notebook paper down to 3 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I believe I used 3 sheets of paper, so it'll make 6 once we fold it in half and put it into the notebook. And then you just stick the folded piece of papers into the piece that we folded for the book cover. And we're gonna staple them right in the center. I do it 2 times. And then I trim off any little pieces of paper that might be sticking out on the outside of the notebook. And then we have the notebook is all finished. And then next we're going to do the bookmark. So take the longest piece that you have, and we're going to cut the bookmark, the paper down to 2 by 6. And then we're going to use the corner rounder. I'm going to use the 4mm on all 4 corners. And we're going to add an eyelet to the top for the twine. So I'm going to punch a little hole there in the center with my little tiny, it's a little tiny hole punch. And then we're going to attach the eyelet there where the hole is that we just made. I'm going to set the bookmark aside for right now. I'm going to take the scrap piece from our index card and use a 10mm corner rounder at the top. And then my example is here, so I'm going to cut out a tab from one of my scrap pieces, and then I'm going to use this tab paper punch and use my scrap piece of paper and punch out one of the tabs. And I'm just going to ink the edges of that little index card with the black soot. And then I'm going to give it a little crease and then put the ink on that. And then I'm going to glue the tab on with my Fabri-Tac onto the top of the little index card. I like this glue because it gives you a little bit of time to kind of move things around and make sure that they're straight and lined up. And then I'm going to go ahead and round the corners on the bottom. And then I'm going to ink the corners where I rounded them. And then next is the hidden paper clip. And I cut my strip down to 1 1/2 by 9. And then go ahead and take your strip, and I fold the right end over to the left where there's 1 1/2 inch left showing. And then I'm going to stick my paper clip down. The short end goes with the short end, and the long end of the paper clip goes on the long end of the paper. And then we're going to fold the long end up and over the paper clip, and then bring the other end up and then over the paper clip. And now that we have everything creased and folded, I'm going to unfold it, take out my paper clip, and then I'm going to hole punch 4mm, not hole punch, paper punch, the corner rounder, that's what it is, corner rounder, on all of the edges with 4mm. And I do all of the edges, all the folds, all the little corners. And when you get all the corners punched, this is what it'll look like. And then attach the paper clip the same way we had it before. The long end of the paper clip should be facing the long end of the paper. And then I'm going to use my Fabri-Tac again. And I'm going to glue quite a bit right there to hold that paper clip in. And I keep it away from the edges a little bit. That way I don't get it oozing out the edge there on the side. And this is the long end of the paper clip that I'm starting with. And then you just fold that back up press that down right there to hold that in place. And then add some glue there to the other side of the paper clip. And then you fold that little top flap down onto the glue. And I press that in place until the glue dries. Make sure you get the edges there. And then once that is dry, we're going to add glue there to that panel, just underneath the one that we folded down. And then you just fold that panel up, push that in place, and then we're going to add a little bit of glue right there to that small piece, and then fold that right over the top there. And then I like to stick a little piece of paper in there just to make sure that I didn't get glue where it shouldn't have. And then just like that, we have the hidden paper clip is all finished. All right, so next we're gonna make this little tag. So grab a little scrap piece of paper. I'm gonna cut this to 4 inches in length. And I'm gonna use my little tab punch. And I believe the width of this tag is going to be 2 inches. And then after you punch that out, just round the corners at the bottom, and we're all finished with that for right now. And then next we're gonna make this little journal card. And I'm gonna cut my paper to 2 inches by 3 inches. And we're going to round all the corners with the 10mm corner rounder. And we're gonna add an eyelet just like we did for the bookmark. So punch a little hole in the center. And then next we're going to make this little embellishment with the heart punch at the top. And I cut this out of one of the pieces of scrap. It's 1 by 2. And I'm going to use my 1-inch heart punch. And I'm going to ink around the edges of the heart. Now you don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can just skip that. And then I'm going to use my Fabri-Tac and just add a little dab of glue there and attach my heart to the top of that rectangle. And then once the glue dries, that little embellishment is done. And then for this little banner, I cut my rectangle at 1 by 2.5. And then what I do is I just cut into the center right there, and then on both ends, I cut right up to the middle to create that little bow end type. And then for this little embellishment, we're going to start with the strip there. That's one of the pieces we cut off of the pocket or the envelope. And I cut that into a strip. It's a 1/2 inch by 1.5. And then for the little banners, I just cut 3 little pieces, about a 1/2 inch by 1 inch. And then I just cut the bottoms of them like we did the last banner. And the middle one I'm going to leave flipped over. That way it gives a little bit of contrast. And then I'm just going to use my Fabri-Tac and I'm going to tack those and glue them right to the back of that strip. And then for this one, I used all small scraps for this. And then for this one, you basically just use the scraps there, the smaller pieces, and you cut them to whatever size that you want. I did not measure any of these pieces. I kind of just cut them down to whatever I thought looked good. And then cut the ends like we did the banner. And then I'm going to pick out a couple other small pieces for the top of this embellishment. You can see that we don't have much scraps left. And then for one of the top pieces, I just rounded the corners on the top of it. And then from there, you just start layering and building the embellishment. I started with the top piece and then added the 3 long pieces at the bottom and kind of staggered them a little bit. And then you can see I put the 3 long pieces on the front of the tab because I'm going to add another piece over top of that to hide that. And then I just stapled that together to hold everything in place. And then you just glue that little piece on top of the staple. And then we have that embellishment done. And then for this next little embellishment, this one here is 3/4 by 1 inch. And I just have a little block there to cut out my 1 inch circle for the top. And then at the bottom, you just cut it like we did the banner. And you can see I'm desperate to get this circle out of that little tiny square, but I end up getting it. And then I just ink it up and fold it in half. And then I take my Fabri-Tac and I glue it to both sides of that little banner that we made. And then once that dries, then that one is all finished. And then for this little bow, you're going to use a bunch of little strips in different sizes. It's a good thing that we only have one more after this because our scraps are starting to look like scraps. And then when you get your strips cut out, you basically just start layering them on top of each other in like an X shape to make a bow. And then I flip some over, that way you would see the white showing on the green and it would have a contrast. And then I use my stapler to staple right through the center of it. I glue another little strip over top of the staple and then just layer a couple little pieces there on top of that. And then for my example, I glued a little rhinestone in the center of it. But then this one is finished. And for this last one, we're going to make this little flag. And then I just cut off another little strip of paper and fold it in half. And I cut a little banner in there at the bottom. And then I just got a little toothpick here for the stick on our flag. And then I cut the point of it off. Add my glue there in the center and on that one side, and I put my toothpick in there and then push the 2 pieces together to glue those together. I really pushed it together real good around that stick to make sure I had a good seal. We're done with the flag. So I have a little strip here left over, so I'm going to put that on the front of the notebook. I just measured how long I needed it and then cut off the end, inked up the little strip, and then I'm going to glue it on the front of the notebook just on the 2 short ends. That way I can still use it to tuck something down inside of that. And then now that we have the notebook with that strip on there, you can attach that little card with the tab right inside of there if you wanted to. And then these are all my scraps left over from a 12 by 12 piece of paper. Some of these pieces I could probably use to layer on something else. But that's really not a whole lot of scraps left. And then you can see a little rundown of all the little projects that we were able to make with that 12 by 12 piece of paper. Now you can go in there and decorate these any way that you would like, with stickers or stamps or more paper or however you would like to do it. But we got 14 things out of that one sheet of paper. It would look great in your junk journal or planner. And if somebody does make this, please tag me and let me see it. I would love to see how you decorated it. Thank you for taking time to watch my video. I really appreciate you.